Let's look at how to work with Ncloth to simulate things such as fabrics and use physics for it. So we're going to recreate this scene with this cloth example, and I'm going to delete this and we're going to start over. So to do this, first we would need to create a plane. And let's bring it up and actually add plenty of subdivisions for it. And I'm going to have this plane turn into a fabric that maybe falls down and is going to land and going to cover some part of my table, some area. So to do this, you want to go to the Effects Rollout menu, and under Ncloth, you would just select your plane and go to Ncloth and create Ncloth. And so now you can see this yellow circle on my polyplane, and that's its nucleus. So since cloth uses physics for simulating it, we're now creating a nucleus that contains all the physics of our scene. So this nucleus contains information such as the gravity of it, and we're going to need it for working with different simulations that have to do with physics. So I'm going to play my scene to see if anything has happened. And before I do that, I just want to make a note that when you're working with Ncloth, it's good to have square proportions in your subdivisions for the geometry to work out well. Another thing that's also good to do is if you've edited your polygonal model a lot, it's good to go and delete its history before adding the Ncloth. In this case, all I've really done is add subdivision, so I'm not going to delete the history. So let's go ahead and play our scene. And right now, all that's happening is that my cloth is falling because gravity is now affecting it, but it's not really bending or deforming in any way. So I need to assign objects that it's going to collide with, and to do that, you can choose the elements you want to have the cloth interacting with. So for example, maybe I want to have it affect my lampshade and maybe just the banana and the tabletop. And I'm going to go back to Ncloth and now click on Create Passive Colliders. So these are colliders in my scene now, and you can see they also have now their own yellow symbol here, which is this rigid for each collider. And that has attributes that can also be edited. But before we do that, let's go back and replay our scene. Okay, so now the cloth is colliding with these objects. And if we select our cloth and look at its properties, we have here an Ncloth shape tab. And you can edit different attributes of it. So for example, you could make it feel like it's a thicker piece of material, or you can say how much of this material self-collides so that it collides with itself. And you can add, for example, self-collision thickness. You can tell it to bounce or to have friction. Overall, when you're starting with Ncloth, it's good to just go with working with presets that Maya already has for it. So if you click on presets, you can see that you can make Ncloth already behave, for example, like an airbag or a beach ball or burlap, denim. You can tell it to behave more like honey or lava. So there's different presets that you can start off of and work around, and you can also just use percentages of each preset and create your own. And then you could even save it here as your own preset. For this example, I'm just going to go ahead and select chiffon. And let's play this again. So you can see the physics of it have changed, right? And I may need to make my animation a little bit larger because it's not having enough time to fall down. So I could do that, or I could either bring this down and save some frames. And now, another thing that's good to do is to cache your animation, because right now, every time we play our animation, Maya is having to calculate all of the physics for each frame. But if we cache this, Maya would no longer need to do that, so the operation wouldn't be so heavy because it would the animation would be saved already. So let's look at how to cache this. So if you go to Ncache, create new cache, and it would be an object. And so now it's going to save the data for every frame for the Ncloth simulation. And then next time, you wouldn't need to, if you want to replay your animation, you wouldn't need to calculate all of the physics for it again. If you change anything here, you would need to recache your animation so that it calculates the new settings. When you're working on your Ncloth simulation and when you're working with physics simulations, it's good to always change your playback speed to play every frame. So your animation won't go at a certain rate. It'll make sure that every frame is calculated and played out. Of course, once you cache it, it's not important anymore, but it's good for when you are working with designing your Ncloth and calculating it. You can also, if you like how your cloth looks at a certain frame, you could duplicate it and keep that geometry. And so you can see now this one has none of the simulation physics properties with it. I only duplicated the geometry. And in this case, I just worked with a polygon plane, but you could also assign Ncloth to other geometries. So for example, you could work with fruits or the lampshade or any other geometry and have it, give it cloth-like properties and use that to deform it. If you want to remove your Ncloth, you can go to Ncloth and remove Ncloth, and it'll delete all of the attributes, all of the Ncloth attributes that you gave it. You can also remove the colliders by just going to your nRigid objects and deleting them. So if I play my scene again now, you'll see that I no longer have my cloth.